Red Bull tried to keep this completely hidden. No announcement. No cameras. No media. But after just one run at Silverstone, Verstappen revealed something he was not supposed to. And it exposes a much bigger problem. Because this is not just an upgrade. This is an emergency fix to a car that is losing almost half a second per lap, and sitting nearly 60 points behind in the championship after just 3 races. A car that even Verstappen could not understand. Until now. So the real question is not what Red Bull tested. It is what Verstappen felt inside that car that forced him to reveal it. It began with almost nothing. No statement from the team. No explanation. Just a quiet run, and a few words from Verstappen that did not sound accidental. Because when he spoke after those first laps, he did not focus on speed. He focused on something much more important. The feeling of the car. And that is where everything starts to shift. Because for the first 3 races, the RB22 had one defining problem. Nobody could read it. Not the engineers. Not the data. Not even Verstappen himself. The car would change corner to corner. Unpredictable. Unstable. Almost impossible to trust at the limit. And then suddenly, after Silverstone, that feeling begins to change. Not completely. Not perfectly. But enough for Verstappen to notice. And if he notices, it matters. Because drivers at that level do not talk about better unless something fundamental has improved. And this is where the first real clue appears. The front wing. Those small elements added to the end plates. Easy to miss. But critical. Because those parts control how air moves around the front tires. They reduce turbulence. They stabilize airflow into the rest of the car. And here is the key detail. Every other team already had them. Red Bull did not, until now. So this is not about gaining an advantage. This is about removing a disadvantage. Fixing something that should have been right from the start. But why was it wrong in the first place? That is where Verstappen's comments start pointing in a different direction. A deeper issue. Weight. Too much of it. Around 20 kilograms over the minimum. That changes everything. Because when a car is that heavy, you cannot just add performance parts. You have to compromise. You remove load. You simplify aerodynamics. You sacrifice balance just to keep the car manageable. And that is exactly what Red Bull had been doing. Until Silverstone. Because now, they are starting to reverse those decisions. Adding back the elements they removed. Trying to recover the performance they lost. And Verstappen felt it. Not as lap time. But as confidence. And confidence is the first step before speed returns. But this is where things become more complex. Because improving one area can create new problems somewhere else. More front wing load means different airflow. Different airflow affects the side pods, the cooling, the balance mid-corner. Everything connects. Which means this is not just a fix. It is a chain reaction. And Red Bull is only at the beginning of it. But there is something else hidden in what Verstappen revealed. Something he did not say directly, but implied. The car is becoming more predictable. And that suggests one critical thing. The floor is already changing. Because in modern Formula 1, stability does not come from the front wing alone. It comes from underneath. From how the car manages airflow across the entire surface. And if that is improving, then Silverstone was not just a test. It was the first sign of a completely different RB22. But the real question is still unanswered. Because one test changes nothing. One feeling proves nothing. And everything now depends on what happens next. Because if that stability holds in Miami, then Red Bull has found a way forward. But if it disappears, then what Verstappen revealed at Silverstone was not a breakthrough. It was just a temporary illusion. But here is where the situation becomes even more fragile. Because what Verstappen felt was controlled. Limited laps. Limited conditions. A controlled environment where problems can hide. Silverstone is smooth. Predictable. Ideal for testing. Miami is the opposite. Bumps. Heat. Long straights mixed with slow corners. A track that exposes weaknesses instantly. And that changes everything. Because a car that feels stable in Silverstone can become unpredictable again in Miami within a single lap. And Red Bull knows that. Which is why Verstappen's leak is not as simple as it sounds. Because he did not say the car is fixed. He did not say it is fast. He only suggested it feels different. And that word is dangerous. Because different can mean better. But it can also mean unstable in a new way. And this is where the deeper problem returns. The concept of the RB22 itself. Ultra-narrow side pods. Extreme packaging. A design that pushes everything to the limit. Brilliant if it works. A nightmare if it does not. Because when a concept like that starts failing, you cannot fix it with small upgrades. You either commit to it, or you start over. And right now, Red Bull is doing something in between. Trying to fix, without fully abandoning the idea. Which is the hardest path possible. Because every change affects the entire car. Add front wing load, you change airflow downstream. Adjust airflow, you affect cooling. Change cooling, you impact reliability. And suddenly, a simple fix becomes a system-wide gamble. Which brings us back to something very few people are talking about. Japan. The cooling issue. The moment Verstappen had to slow down, not because of pace, but because of risk. That was not an isolated failure. It was a warning. A signal that the car is operating too close to its limits. And now, with new parts, new airflow, new balance, that risk does not disappear. It evolves. And this is why Miami becomes the real test. Not just of performance, but of stability, of reliability, of whether this new direction actually works under pressure. Because in a race, there is no hiding. No controlled runs. No perfect conditions. Only reality. And that reality will answer the one question Red Bull is trying to avoid. Is this car finally becoming predictable? Or is it still hiding a problem that no upgrade can truly fix? Because if Verstappen's feeling survives Miami, then Silverstone was the turning point. But if it does not, then what he revealed was not progress. It was the first sign of a much deeper instability that has not been solved yet. And this is where everything reaches its breaking point. Because there is one detail that connects every problem Red Bull has right now. Not the front wing. Not the weight. Not even the floor. The correlation. The difference between what they expect and what actually happens on track. Because inside the factory, the RB22 makes sense. Wind tunnel data looks promising. Simulations show potential. The numbers say the car should work. But on track, it does not behave the same way. And that is the most dangerous problem any team can face. Because you are no longer fixing performance. You are chasing a misunderstanding. And this is where Verstappen's leak becomes even more important. Because when he says the car feels different, he is not just describing the upgrade. He is confirming that something finally matched reality. Even if only partially. Even if only for a few laps. That connection between data and feeling, that is what Red Bull has been missing. But here is the problem. One correct signal does not guarantee a correct direction. Because if your foundation is slightly wrong, every improvement can still lead you further away from the real solution. And that is exactly the risk they are taking now. Especially after the internal changes. New technical leadership. New structure. New responsibilities inside the team. Those changes do not happen in a stable environment. They happen when the team is searching for answers. And right now, Red Bull is searching. Not refining. Not optimizing. Searching. Which means Miami is not just a race weekend. It is an experiment under pressure. Because for the first time this season, they will bring a package that tries to align everything. Aerodynamics. Weight distribution. Cooling. Driver confidence. All at once. And that almost never works perfectly on the first attempt. So now imagine the situation. Verstappen goes into Miami. With a car that feels better. But is still not fully understood. A car that might be faster. But could still break under pressure. A car that might finally respond. Or suddenly fall apart again. And that uncertainty? That is what makes this moment so critical. Because if Miami confirms the data, then everything changes. The team regains direction. Development accelerates. Confidence returns. But if Miami exposes another mismatch, another gap between expectation and reality, then Red Bull faces something much bigger than a bad start. They face a season where every upgrade becomes a question mark. Every decision, a risk. And every race, a test. Which brings us to the final layer of this story. Because Verstappen did not just reveal that the car feels different. He revealed timing, urgency, pressure. And when a driver like him starts hinting at those things, it usually means one reality. The team is closer to the edge than it appears. So now everything comes down to this. Not what Red Bull built. Not what they tested. Not even what Verstappen said. But what happens when that car is pushed to its absolute limit, with no room left to hide. Because that moment will reveal the truth they have been trying to control since Silverstone. And when that moment arrives, there is no hiding anymore. No controlled laps. No filtered data. No carefully chosen words. Just the car, at full speed, under real pressure. Because Miami will force the RB22 to reveal everything. The strengths, if they exist. The weaknesses, if they are still there. And most importantly, the truth behind what Verstappen felt at Silverstone. Because up until now, everything has been contained. 200 kilometers. Limited variables. A controlled environment designed to reduce risk. But a race does the opposite. It multiplies risk, high fuel loads, tire degradation, dirty air, wheel-to-wheel battles. Every scenario the car has struggled with comes back at once. And that is where the illusion breaks. Because a car can feel stable alone on track, and become unpredictable the moment it follows another car. A car can feel balanced in clean air, and suddenly lose grip when conditions change. That is the real test. And that is what Red Bull cannot simulate perfectly. Which is why Verstappen's words matter, but only to a point. Because feeling better in Silverstone does not guarantee surviving Miami. And this is where the pressure reaches its peak. Because the championship is already slipping. Points lost cannot be recovered easily. Momentum is already with other teams. And Red Bull is reacting, not controlling. That shift alone changes everything. Because for the first time in years, they are not setting the standard. They are chasing it. And chasing forces decisions. Faster upgrades. Higher risks. Less margin for error. Which brings us to the final, critical layer. Because everything we have seen, the secret test, the hidden upgrades, the subtle words from Verstappen, all of it leads to one moment, one lap, one sequence of corners in Miami where the car will be pushed without compromise. And in that moment, there are only two possible outcomes. Either the RB22 holds, stable, predictable, competitive, and Red Bull begins its comeback. Or, it breaks. Not physically, conceptually. The balance disappears. The confidence fades. The same problems return under a different form. And if that happens, then what Verstappen revealed at Silverstone was not a solution. It was a warning. Because sometimes, the first improvement is not the end of the problem. It is the beginning of understanding how deep it really goes. And now, there is nowhere left to hide.